A man spends weeks holding everything together on his own. Fire, 50,000 lost, business threatened, clients disappearing, sleepless nights. On a Saturday night, he decides to open his heart to the woman who shared his life. He cried, and her response was, "You look so ridiculous." The question isn't whether he was wrong to cry. The question is, what does that phrase reveal about who was on the other side?
I cried in front of my girlfriend, and that was my worst mistake. Laura is 28 years old. We had been together for almost 3 years, living together for 1. She moved in to be with me. We split the utility and grocery bills. The rest, the rent, the assets, was mine. Until recently, the relationship worked. It wasn't perfect. There was friction from living together, schedules, organization, time spent together. Nothing that seemed unsolvable. Or so it seemed. It was 3:17 a.m. when my phone rang. It was the warehouse security guard. I answered half asleep, thinking it was a mistake. Then I heard him shouting that smoke was coming out. I got dressed in under a minute. I drove there without fully processing what was happening. When I arrived, there were already flames coming out of one of the side windows. The firefighters arrived quickly, but quickly wasn't enough. The materials on their own aren't highly flammable, but they were packaged in cardboard and plastic, boxes upon boxes, and that was enough to fuel the fire for almost an hour. I stood outside watching the place where I had invested years of work turn to smoke. I didn't feel panic. I felt emptiness. That sensation when something too big happens, and the brain simply can't process it. When the fire was controlled, the damage was done. The main storage area, destroyed. The boxes that didn't burn directly were contaminated by smoke and water. And medical material exposed to smoke or moisture cannot be sold. Health regulation. End of story. The next day, the preliminary assessment indicated a probable short circuit in the building's old electrical system. The insurance? In process, with clauses, investigation deadlines, and deductibles. Nothing immediate. The direct loss in merchandise, just over $50,000. On the morning after the fire, I made calls I never imagined I'd need to make. I called the new clinics, the hospital that had been working with me for years. I explained what had happened. I asked for more time. Some understood, others didn't. In this sector, punctuality isn't a differentiator, it's an obligation. Failing to deliver on time means they'll find another supplier, and they generally don't come back. The loss of 50,000 was the visible number. Credibility, future contracts, relationships built over years, that was what was really keeping me up at night. In the days that followed, I barely slept. Meeting with the accountant, with the lawyer, with the insurance agent, I reviewed every contract looking for penalties. I tried to restock merchandise on an emergency basis with other suppliers, but import and distribution in volume don't get resolved in days. Laura was present when I received the final confirmation that practically all the inventory was lost. She hugged me, said we would get through it, that it was just money. I heard her, but for me it wasn't just money. It was months of work. It was signed commitments. It was the feeling of having failed, even knowing rationally that I hadn't caused any of it. I started noticing changes in myself, difficulty concentrating. I reviewed the numbers repeatedly without finding a way out. I woke up with anxiety, that constant pressure in the chest of someone who feels they're on the edge of something. Laura started complaining. She said I was obsessed, that all I talked about was work, that even at dinner I kept checking quotes on my phone. She wasn't wrong. One night, she told me she missed the calm man I used to be. I replied that that man hadn't just lost 50,000 in the middle of the night. Several weeks had passed since the fire. The insurance was still in process. Some clients had waited. Others had already signed with other suppliers. I was exhausted, physically and mentally. That Saturday night, we were in the living room. The atmosphere wasn't tense, but it wasn't light either. I said I needed to talk. It took effort to organize my thoughts. I was never one to talk much about emotion. I'm practical. I solve. I execute. I move forward. But that night I felt that if I didn't say something, I was going to explode inside. I explained that I was scared, that even trying to stay in control, the loss had affected me more than I wanted to admit, that I felt constant pressure in my chest, that I woke up thinking about debts, lost clients, reputation, that I was ashamed to feel that way because I was supposedly the guy who always has a plan. As I spoke, my voice began to tremble. I tried to hold it together. I couldn't. My eyes filled up. I cried. It wasn't exaggerated or dramatic crying. It was that restrained cry of someone who had held on too hard for too long, the kind that shows up when the body simply can't pretend everything is fine anymore. I expected understanding. I didn't need a solution, just someone to be there. She looked at me in silence for a few seconds. Then she said, "You look so ridiculous crying."
50,000 lost, weeks without sleep, business threatened. And when he finally opened his heart, she thought it was ridiculous. This isn't a lack of empathy. This is straight up contempt.
I stood still. For a moment I thought I had heard wrong. I asked what she meant. She replied that she wasn't used to seeing me like that I seemed weak, that it wasn't the image she had of me. She added that crying over money didn't make sense, that business has risks, that I needed to act like an adult. I tried to explain that I wasn't crying just over money, that I was crying because of the fear, the pressure, the feeling of having lost control of something I built from scratch. She shook her head, said I was exaggerating, that it was a situation that, with work, would have a solution. I got up, went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, red eyes, but I didn't see myself as ridiculous. I saw myself as exhausted. When I came back to the living room, she was on her phone. I sat across from her, said that her comment had hurt me. She replied that she wasn't obligated to react the way I expected, and that if I wanted a strong partner, I needed to act like one. That's when something inside me turned. I tried to continue the conversation calmly. I said I didn't need her to fix anything, that I just wanted support, that after everything that had happened with the warehouse, the contracts, the financial pressure, the minimum I expected from someone who shared my life was to stand by my side. She put her phone down on the table, looked at me with a closed expression. "I don't understand why you're taking this so seriously. I just said you seemed ridiculous. I've never seen you cry like that." I replied that that was exactly why it was an important moment, that it wasn't something common for me, that if I was opening up, it was because I trusted her. She shook her head again. "It's just that I don't like seeing you like this. It seems unattractive to me. A real man doesn't sit around crying over work problems." A real man. She used that phrase, in 2026, to a guy who's managing a $50,000 crisis on his own. All right then. I didn't raise my voice. I asked what she understood by a real man, whether for her being a man meant having no emotion. I said I was talking about a real, measurable loss that had affected my stability and my reputation, that it wasn't a trivial discussion. She replied that business has risks, that if I chose to be an entrepreneur, I needed to take the consequences with maturity, that crying solved nothing. I explained that I wasn't crying to solve anything. I was crying because I had spent weeks suppressing everything, that I woke up with anxiety, that I was doing everything possible to recover the business, and that the only thing I was asking for was emotional support. That's when she said more directly, "You're being a crybaby." The word hung in the air. I felt something harden inside me. It wasn't explosive anger, it was disappointment, cold, solid. I asked if she really thought that. She said yes, that the men she admired were strong, decisive, that they didn't fall apart like that my reaction was making her lose confidence in me. I stopped trying to make her understand. I started observing her as if I were seeing a different person. I composed myself, took a deep breath, changed focus. I said that beyond the emotional side, there was something practical to discuss, that the loss had been significant, that even trusting in the business's recovery, in the short term we needed to adjust our spending. I explained with numbers. 50,000 in inventory doesn't replenish overnight. Even with insurance covering part of it, there would be a deductible and waiting time. I needed liquidity to restock merchandise without losing more clients. For the next few months, the responsible thing was to tighten our belts. That meant cutting expensive dinners, unnecessary trips, superfluous purchases, temporary, necessary. She looked at me as if I had said something absurd. "Are you serious?" I replied that yes, I was, that it was logical, that we couldn't keep spending as if nothing had happened. Her expression changed. "Don't even think that I'm going to limit myself because of your bad luck. I didn't cause this fire." I said I wasn't blaming her for anything, that we were a couple, we lived together, that financial decisions affect both of us. She firmly refused. "I want to keep living the way I have been. I like going out to dinner at nice places. I like buying quality clothes. I'm not going to be counting pennies because you lost money." I felt incredulity. I asked if she understood that we were talking about stability, that if the business weakened further, everything would get complicated for everyone. She replied that I was exaggerating, that I had always earned well, and that in a few months, everything would be back to normal, that she didn't see why she had to sacrifice her lifestyle over something temporary. I said that precisely because it was temporary, it needed to be managed carefully, that a business doesn't sustain itself on optimism, it sustains itself on planning. Then she said the phrase that closed everything for me, "I'm not with you to live in fear. If you're going to be obsessed, and now also with austerity, that's not what I want." The word austerity came out of her mouth almost with disgust. At that moment, I understood that I was no longer discussing money. I was discussing values, about what each of us understood by responsibility. I asked directly, was her response to a crisis to keep spending the same and wait for everything to resolve itself? She said her response was to not let a bad phase define her life. I replied that for me, maturity was adjusting when necessary. That if I was asking for moderation, it wasn't out of pettiness, it was strategy. The conversation lost its emotional heat and became cold, clear. I looked at her and understood. She wanted the comfortable version of me, the stable provider who pays for expensive dinners and buys gifts without thinking twice, not the vulnerable version, not the version that goes through a crisis. I got up. She kept talking about how I was exaggerating everything, turning a manageable problem into drama. I interrupted her calmly. I think you should leave. Silence. What do you mean? I think you should leave my apartment. She stood up too. That I couldn't make a decision like that in the heat of the moment. I said I wasn't being impulsive. That hearing her call me a crybaby and say that a real man doesn't cry had changed something in me. That hearing her say she wasn't willing to limit herself while I tried to stabilize my business had made it clear that we were not in the same place. Heavy silence. I said she could stay that night if she needed to, but that in the coming days she needed to find another place, that the apartment was mine and that I didn't feel comfortable sharing it with someone who saw my vulnerability as weakness. She looked at me with anger and surprise mixed together, as if she hadn't really considered the possibility that I would follow through on what I was saying. Then came the final phrase, "You're a crybaby. You know what? Tomorrow I'll go find a real man."
She said that plain and clear, not as a veiled provocation, directly, trying to hurt. That's when the guy became someone else.
I wasn't calm anymore. I stood up and raised my voice too. "Then do it now. If that's what you want, don't wait until tomorrow." She opened her eyes wide. "What's gotten into you? You're exaggerating everything." "No, I'm taking seriously what you yourself are saying. If you think I'm a crybaby and you need someone else, you can go." The argument escalated, both of us talking loudly. She started crying, but it was a cry mixed with anger. She said I couldn't do that to her, that she had said everything in the heat of the moment, that she was also stressed, that she felt she had been sidelined by the business since the fire, that she was tired of living under tension. I said that if she was stressed, she could have expressed that without humiliating me, that what she did wasn't communication, it was contempt. She tried to come closer, touched my arm, said she didn't want to leave, that she hadn't been serious. But I was no longer in the same emotional place as before the conversation. Something had changed in a way that wasn't going back. It wasn't pride. It was the clarity that if I gave in there, I was accepting being treated that way. I said I couldn't ignore what she had said, that those things don't disappear just because someone says them in the heat of the moment, that the words that come out in the worst moment tend to be the most truthful. For several minutes, the argument went in circles. She alternated between anger and victimhood. She said I was being unfair, that I was being cold, that every couple fights, that I wasn't seeing the pressure she was also feeling. Finally, she grabbed her bag, started packing the basics with abrupt movements, said that if that's what I wanted, she would leave. I didn't try to stop her. While she packed, she kept repeating that I would regret it, that when I was alone I would understand what I had lost, that no one could put up with my obsessive ways. I stayed silent. She called a cab on her phone. The wait was tense. No one spoke, just her heavy breathing breaking the silence. Before leaving, she looked at me again. "You can't do this to me." I said things I didn't mean, I replied calmly. The words that come out in the worst moment tend to be the most sincere. She shook her head and left. From the window I watched her get into the cab. I didn't call. I didn't send a message. I stood there looking at the empty street after the car disappeared. That night I slept little, but I felt less weight than I had in weeks. The next day I had no news from her until the afternoon, until a friend sent me a screenshot. It was a post on Facebook, from Laura's profile. The text insinuated that I was a scammer, said that I had sold merchandise I never delivered, that several people should be careful with me. It didn't mention the fire, didn't mention canceled contracts, didn't mention the insurance investigation. It just insinuated that I had charged for a product that didn't exist. In my business, reputation is everything. A public accusation like that, even vague, can sink years of credibility in hours. I went to her profile, saw the post. There were already comments asking what had happened, people reacting with surprise. I didn't respond publicly. I acted directly. First, I took screenshots of everything. Then I filed a formal complaint on the platform for defamation and false content affecting my commercial activity. I attached basic documentation, proof of the fire's existence, contractual relationship with my clients. Then I sent a private message to 2 clients who I knew had indirect contact with her, clarifying the situation professionally. I followed the developments over the next few hours. Facebook responded quickly. The post was taken down for violating policies related to unsubstantiated accusations. I don't know if she removed it voluntarily or if it was taken down by the review, but it came off the air. That didn't erase the impact. I understood at that moment that the person with whom I had shared my life had not only reacted with contempt to my vulnerability, she was willing to burn my reputation when things didn't go the way she wanted. A few weeks have passed since that night. The insurance process moved forward. I'll receive a significant portion of the amount, not everything, but enough to breathe. The most loyal clients stayed. 2 hospitals agreed to reschedule deliveries. 1 clinic even offered a partial advance to help me restock faster. That gesture reminded me that trust built over years doesn't disappear because of a crisis. I reduced personal expenses, adjusted projections, negotiated deadlines with suppliers. It wasn't easy, but I'm seeing stability appear on the horizon again. At home, the silence felt strange in the first few weeks. Then it became necessary. Laura never made contact again after the post was taken down. I didn't reach out either. Sometimes I think about that night on the couch, the exact moment when she said I looked ridiculous crying. Not because of the pain of the comment itself, because of what it revealed. Losing 50,000 in inventory was hard. Very hard. But losing the illusion that the person by your side will still be there when the business shakes, when money gets tight, when the image cracks, that's a different category of loss. The business is starting to recover. I'm not where I was before the fire, but I'm not in ruins either. And at least I have clarity about one thing. I'd rather rebuild everything from scratch with dignity than sustain an appearance of stability alongside someone who confuses vulnerability with weakness. The apartment is still in my name.
This story shows us that vulnerability is not weakness, but a loyalty test for those who stand by our side. If you share your life with someone who despises your pain in your most difficult moment, you don't have a partner. You have a spectator of your success who can't handle your process. His mistake wasn't crying, it was trusting his heart to someone who only wanted his assets.